I call the meeting to order, and if you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
These updated.
Yes, these are updated now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to public comments. If you please share the policy.
Yeah, of course. This is Nicholas Handy, School Board Secretary, Communications Coordinator. Just sharing the public participation policy up on the screen. Feel free to give that a read before you make a public comment. Public comments, use your first name, last name, and town of residence before making a comment. If you are remote, use the hand raise feature at the bottom of your screen, and we should be able to address you if you're remote. Obviously, if you're in person, we do have a microphone that we can hand to you so that the remote audience can also hear you. So we are officially ready for public comments.
Okay, so is there anyone physically present that would like public comments?
Okay. All right. Thank you. With the masking in question tonight as part of the agenda, that's what I'm here commenting on.
Sorry, you're supposed to start with your name.
Oh, yep. Kale. Well, sorry. Kale Stenerson.
I know who you are. Someone else does, but you know.
Yeah. Kale Stenerson, lifetime Range resident. I'm one of 9 kids and 3rd generation going to the school. My daughter is at RMS. First off, I want to thank you all for being a part of this board. We know it's not for a financial gain that you're doing it, so it must be to give back to the community. So we certainly appreciate that. One of the issues I have with this whole masking conversation is that last year, so much time was spent to put together and run a committee to address this issue. Why are we revisiting it now? This board asked for volunteers, and you got some 30 people, a mix of both talent of teachers, parents, and the like. And how long did it take? 6 months coming up with this matrix? Setting up COVID protocols for the meetings and remote meetings, and all the time and effort was putting into creating the matrix. This board approved the matrix and committed to following it. Comments were made when this matrix was presented that all last year we never even came close to the top threshold. The matrix takes care of circumstances changing, and to my understanding, we haven't hit any thresholds. Yes, we now have the Omicron variant, but it isn't that a less severe and variant? And the fact still exists that the kids are often barely affected by it. That was surely the case in my home. At the very least, this board should go back to what was previously committed to and go back to the matrix. I have another thing, an open-ended question, if you will. Are these case counts all school driven, or are they more coming from the kids' homes? Are siblings giving it to each other? The adults in our homes are still working and living their lives. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Miami at the Pats game, and yes, they did lose, but it was still a good time. But there were 64,000 fans packed in the stadium, pretty much everyone unmasked. This happens 16 times every week across the country at NFL games. 60 to 90,000 people jam-packed in, shoulder to shoulder for 3 to 4 hours. And this is just one level of one sport. And yet we mask our students in classroom sizes of 20 or 30 with desks 3 feet apart, who regardless of the case count have mild symptoms. Something doesn't seem to add up. I asked the board to at least stick to what they've already committed to and go back to the matrix. And at the end of this year, when the commitment to this matrix ends, let's go back to normal. I take the responsibility of the health of my kids. I trust the school with the responsibility of teaching them, and I certainly do love my responsibility of supplementing that education here at home. If kids or parents believe masking works, go for it. Mask up. I have no problem with that whatsoever. The matrix never says you can't or shouldn't wear a mask. Please make masking voluntary, make it highly recommended if you want to. Just don't make it mandatory for our kids. Thanks for your time.
Thank you much, Kale.
All right, we don't appear to have any digital comments at this time.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll move on then to the superintendent's report.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here tonight and those online as well. So the couple of topics that we'll talk about tonight are the COVID-19 cases, and we're on January 31st. This is the last day of when the school board had put that temporary masking mandate in place during the time when we believed that there was going to be some spiking going on within cases and a likelihood of greater absenteeism from staff and from learners as well. But I think our conversation was more about making sure that we could remain in person during that time frame, and staffing was of utmost importance as we had seen an increase in absenteeism due to illness. So we'll go and we'll take a look at the state data, some of our personal data, some information that we were asked to find, and then we'll go from there. I don't have a written recommendation. I do have a verbal recommendation, and we'll get to that at that point in time. We'll also, toward the end, talk about student services financials. I am not going to ask that we make any sort of financial motion tonight. We can't actually do that here in this meeting, but we will have a conversation letting you know the kind of the state of affairs this year, and also what we might be able to do to rectify some of the financial concerns that have arisen due to higher costs, increased special education costs, and so forth this year. Prior to doing any of that, I just thought I would read a little bit of information to anyone who is viewing this at this point in time. As this afternoon, around noontime, we were able to find that an email asking me some questions about a meeting that we had recently with the Jaffrey Select Board. And that was last Thursday. On Wednesday, I believe we were invited, and we had that meeting this past Thursday. And so the newspaper, the local newspaper that had asked me to connect with them, we had asked them to send us some questions. We get back to them. School days are pretty busy, especially in the middle on Mondays when we come back, and we did the very best we could within a couple hours to give them all that information, only to find out that it had already been published, and some of that information that was in that was not necessarily the most accurate of information. So I'm just going to read a little bit of some of the inquiries that were provided to me that were of interest, so that I can put that out there. And we'll certainly put some infographics out there, and we'll have a conversation during the deliberative session on February 9th as well to explain situations. So there was apparently the individual who reached out to me, the reporter said that there was a gentleman in this community, I believe, who had indicated that he was going to go to the deliberative session and request or try to get the operating budget, the proposed operating budget, put down around $750,000 back to this current year's approved operating budget. We all know very well that costs to even do business the same have increased significantly. We also know very well that we aren't even proposing the same budget and the same functionality next year, and it still costs us more. So the 2022-23 proposed budget represents last year's approved budget, with cost increases largely due to the inflationary cost of items and services. For example, there are mandated student service costs out of district placements that have risen approximately 200%. Throughout the budget process this year, our district, school board, and finance committee have all made efforts to keep the proposed budget as low as possible. This effort has resulted in cutting items that are in our current budget. Some of these items include $118,000 in SAU personnel, Chromebook purchases of $81,000, teacher laptops $21,000, copiers $36,000, facilities and equipment $70,000, and other equipment that has of educational nature like subscriptions and so forth around $75,000. Given that we haven't added anything to this year's proposed operating budget, Any further cuts would represent a removal of staffing and or programming. If the default budget is passed this year, we are currently looking at having to reduce in some areas. If we were going to, we don't have decision making at this point in time to say what would be reduced, but an easy way to kind of look at it when you have a budget that's 75 to 76% staffing, it would be, you know, if we were thinking teachers, about 6 teachers. The 22-23 default budget is approximately $220,000 over the 2021-22 school year's approved budget. So having to make further cuts above and beyond the default budget, which is already about $500,000 below the proposed budget, will surely represent further costs and cuts to staffing and programming. Another question that they asked was, as this was brought up by a select board member at the budget hearing, is the current level of staffing necessary? What would the impact be of cutting staff to class sizes, extracurriculars, etc.? I won't read every aspect of this because it's a long answer, but we understand that we have had a reduction in learners due to the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been a number of changes to our district's mitigation strategies during that time frame, social distancing, periods of masking, going remote, that have caused some parents to choose a different direction in education, homeschooling or private school. As our mitigation strategies have changed, we have seen our numbers increase and decrease, and we want to be responsible with our decision-making around the district staffing levels rather than reacting to fluctuations in our student body during a pandemic. We would like to wait until things have stabilized so that we can thoughtfully plan staffing levels that adequately address our student population and programming. To summarize other paragraphs that we had sent is that there have been significant changes in student population and, quite frankly, the way people even communicate with one another in society over these last 2 years. Socialization, behavior, respect, all of those sorts of things, social emotional well-being, it's in the news every single day. It's all over the place, and it certainly has not missed this location. We're doing a lot of things very well this year. Our teachers are doing an amazing job with our learners. And I commend them, our support staff as well. But it's not all going to be solved in 1 year. And we need to continue to have the tools in place, the supports in place to make sure that we can get to a spot where our learners are available to learn and are learning at high levels. So just cutting a couple $100,000, $250,000 here, $500,000 there. Those are very big decisions that could, they certainly will have consequences, but could have much larger consequences than perhaps the average person would think. You know, it's yeah, and certainly over time. I will also say that over the past 3 cycles of our budgeting, because we budget very tightly. We're very conservative in how we go forward. We're typically underneath, we come in under default. This year, it was impossible to do so. And we have actually, on the school side of things, within the town of Jaffrey, which is where this individual was from, we have seen a decrease for the last 3 years in tax rates due to the school side. One of those years was $3 off the tax rate. So things ebb and flow. No one planned on having the price surges that we have experienced, that everyone's experienced. It's terrible. It's not a fun place to be. It's uncomfortable. But we are required to do many things by law, and to cut back on services for 85% of individuals because we have to raise costs to heat the place, to electrical costs and so forth, in the tune of $150,000 more just to run things as they were supposed to be. And then special ed services, which are very, very expensive, and we need to do that. We have a moral obligation as well as a legal obligation there. So I would ask that people, if they have questions, ask me, ask the school board members, We can give you some factual information. I thought we had a good meeting at the select board this past Thursday and was able to at least have people understand where things were at. I don't know whether someone's going to come in and try to reduce further than even the default budget. There is an opportunity. I mean, you have a choice already, a difference between, you know, that and $500,000 less. So, sorry, the operating budget and $500,000 less being the default. I would caution us from making rash decisions to save a few pennies on the 1,000 that have or may have significant impact for next year and certainly years to come. Going to the superintendent report as prepared now. We'll take a look at the state COVID data. We can see that the graph over, this is off of the DPH or the Health and Human Service website. And you can see that this graph on the left hasn't changed a whole lot, really. I keep it up there just because to be consistent. It's the graph on the right that has changed. And so you can see that the graph on the right through the month of January, we met on January 3rd. During January 3rd, we said, hey, this is going to be a month that we're likely going to have a spike. It is being reported as likely having that spike occur, perhaps higher than the rest of the pandemic that we've been involved with. And also because of behavior patterns of people getting together and being after the holiday. And we know it usually runs about a 2 to 3 week course after that. We expected that that would happen. There was conversation here at the board. It was a decision. It was not a unanimous decision. I believe it was either a 4-2-1 or a 5-2 vote to mask during the month of January. That was made after, you know, some conversation about making sure that we could remain in person. We do know that damage, though there's value to remote learning and remote learning in pockets and with specific individuals, it is not a for all or for most type of situation. And a lot of these, I would say, social emotional concerns that we have here, again, that we're handling very well overall, you know, we wouldn't be in those circumstances. Those learners would not be in those circumstances had they not, had they been in school for 1.5 years instead of being in and out and so forth and having that type of instability. So the math did exactly the way it was that it said. You know, the graph went up and then it started to come down again. And at this point today, this is actually as of Friday, the 28th, I believe it's a little bit lower than that. We are now at that same spot where we made the decision to go and mask for the month of January. So you can see the trend that data right now is going in the opposite direction. And while it certainly could go up and down a little bit, I believe that the general consensus out there is that it's going to not be hovering up at that peak again. Our data suggests that it's been going along with that as well. So we'll see that. We had a little bit in the next slide, just the thing we report every time, really no change in vaccination percentages. There is some interesting data that the CDC has on vaccination, those who have, you know, just hospitalization, death rates and so forth, those who are unvaccinated versus those who are vaccinated versus those who are vaccinated with a booster. People can read it on their own, make whatever decisions they want. But the new cases in the last 14 days, 104, that was a pretty high number, but 53 active cases actually lower than the last time I reported. And the same type of situation with RING. The new case in the last 14 days, as we had that big spike there, was 91, but we have fewer active cases than 2 weeks ago when I had reported this in the town. This graph right here is just sickness data district-wide, and this is a day by day, what we would be reporting out. You can see that really the majority of the year here, I don't know if this has everything, that we really haven't, as one individual said tonight, we haven't really gone over those thresholds. 10%, we have hit over 10% a few times with total sickness, which involves COVID, involves other sicknesses. We also have some quarantine due to some sort of illness, but waiting to find out what category they're in. We can go to the next one. This shows a different type. It's the same thing, but just differently. That really since the beginning of the school year, basically we have a consistent level of illness and it just depends what illness it is. And so we had more, a variety of illnesses early on. As we said before, you know, we had hand, foot, mouth disease, we had strep, we had actually a fair amount of that. The flu came really early this year with a couple situations. We knew it was that because we had people test for COVID. And so they found out that it was other sorts of things. As it's kind of come along, we know that the Omicron variant is more, you can catch it more easily. And so you can see that that number has increased during the time, but the overall illness has not increased. We have had more people, however, that yellow area on quarantine. So people having some symptoms or people following the regulations that we have because their family members are ill. And so they are at times quarantining there as well, or in isolation if they are ill. And they're go to the next one. This is similar to what I had before. I just kept that circle on that jump. That jump is there because we had a gap in time. So you can see that there's some dates missing because we were on vacation during that time frame. So when we came back, we had 36 new cases. That's quite a jump, and it's kind of gone up regularly since then. The last few days, it's toned down. I haven't reported out tonight of the cases that we had today. And we'll talk about reporting out a little bit later on. I can tell you here that we have 2 new cases, one at the middle school and one at the Jaffrey grade school, I believe. And so today it was even fewer, and we even had the weekend. Usually we see something a little bit more over the weekend. This next graph shows the number of cases reported, the 7-day average. So this is the district's 7-day average, and that's the kind of filled in graph. The bars there are the number of cases reported on a specific day. And so the 7-day average you can see that's what the graph looks like. And during the month of January, as anticipated, we had a higher 7-day average. We certainly had some spikes during that time frame. And the reason, again, the information we showed, it was climbing a little bit in November, climbing a little bit more in December, and then we had January. And then you can see that it's tapering off toward the end. Now that we're hitting February. Actually very similar to our conversations that we had last year when we were talking remote versus in person. This next one is this the next one?
Yeah, so this one was the one that we took
right.
out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks. So this next one is the same thing, except that we have included some gap days in there where we don't report, like weekends. And so you can see that's a truer picture of what's happening right there. Next slide. This is the 7-day average of the district versus the 7-day average of the state. Now the state, understand, you would have to multiply those numbers by 1,000 to get to what the state actually is. But we were just trying to see if there was some same curvature, same kind of patterning here. And so the darker of the two, I believe the bottom one, Nick, is that the state?
Yeah, so the more maroon colored one, that is your district. Your more like bronzy tone one is the state.
Yeah, so the state one continues on. We have, ours has the bigger spikes there, but we also see that there's this there's a couple of valleys there where we weren't reporting. And so when you're not reporting, those numbers kind of, you sum those numbers up and it gets larger. So you might see a trend, a graph that would look much more similar to the states if that kind of mountaintop there, that big one, collapsed into that valley a little bit. And then the same thing with that other spike came in, and you can see the little dip just before that. So it would be a little bit more. It would still have, you know, gone up during the time of January, but it probably would not have those spikes just like that, because we were reporting clumps of days during that time frame, where the state just keeps it going. So the graph, I would say actually the graph is, the trends aren't that far off from the state. District-wide active cases, you can see that the district-wide active cases had increased significantly at the beginning of January, stayed, you know, around there mid-January and to kind of the third week in January, and then have now tapered off. And if we were to have it today, you would see those numbers lower for active cases of COVID. This is the conversation that we had last time. The month of November, again, that real spike down. That was a day that we weren't reporting information. So you can see that around, I think it was the 11th of November. Was it that may, oh, that was Veterans Day. Yeah, so we really, there's no data there. But the average staff daily absenteeism due to illness was 13 people roughly during the month of November. That's a lot, but you know, we still were able to run classes, run school, do things well. Go to the next. December was where we started to see, okay, it started to go up toward the end of November. And then ignoring the holiday time frame at the end and the couple days prior to the holiday, we had that, although I include those couple days into the staff average. So the majority of the month, the average was higher than that 18.63 because it includes those 2 outlier days just before the break. So it would be closer to 20, which is what you kind of see for the rest of the time frame, a graph that really hovers around 20, a little bit above, a little bit below, out on a daily basis due to illness. Now, you can, if it's like the SAU, if a few of us are out, it doesn't impact the day-to-day class situation as much as if it's certain, you know, groups of teachers. And if you're a classroom teacher, that's the biggest impact. And if they're out, then that's where we have difficulty. We all know we've had for years, we've had difficulty with sub rates and so forth. So this brought us to November saying, all right, we kind of were at a high in December. We see cases going up. They're reporting that they're going to go up in November. We can't afford to have, you know, staff illnesses continue to rise like that, because we need to be in person, both for the staff's health, but also for the sake of our learners. So we go to January. We implemented the masking during that time frame. You can see at the very beginning, we were hovering above that 20 mark for a little bit of time, and we even had that in the middle of the month. We've had pockets of time where it's been lower, and I would say across the district, actually, if we were to include today and last Friday a little bit more, you know, last Friday maybe we had a little bit, or Thursday we had a little bit higher across the district, but we have had some dips down there in that toward the end of January. The average across the board, certainly things were a little more even across the entire month. The average was a little bit lower than the average December, but I would say it was pretty much the same as December, which actually was really good because we thought that we were likely going to see a higher number than that. I think that I was on the wrong slide. I apologize. I think that, you know, the conversation really comes out is during the month of January, was masking, was it helpful? I don't see that our data looks very different than what the state has for data. As things increase at the state level, things increased here. As things have gone down at the state level, things have gone down here. I do think that to answer a question tonight, it is very possible that a lot of the cases are occurring as we, saw right on the way back. Obviously, when you're not in school and you're, meeting with a bunch of people, you're going to be exposed to more individuals, maybe on the weekends, what have you, in home. Certainly, we know that at the beginning of the year anyway, most of it was in home. We have that data. When I look at the information about the cases, the quarantine and so forth, you can see if we went back to that slide, let's not go back to the slide, but if we were to go back to that slide, you see that quarantine is still the highest. Our nurses are doing their job. If someone is symptomatic, those individuals are not remaining in here. And it's maybe because of another illness, or maybe COVID, but we're still going through those processes, those protocols. And our nurses have done a stellar job all year long in that way. Those who are asymptomatic, we're not going to find out anyway, unless you just do random testing. So at this point in time, I think we accomplished what we wanted to during the month of January from a standpoint of making sure whether it works or not. I think that's inconclusive. I think that our data shows that we were able to stay in school. We did some things that we did everything we possibly could to make sure that during the time of the highest spike, we did not increase our numbers or our illnesses per se, like we were in December when we were going on the hike. We kind of flattened out a little bit for the staff anyway, and that allowed us to remain in person. So it could have had an impact, could have had a positive impact. I don't think it was a detrimental situation. Our kids did a pretty good job overall with keeping the masks on. Certainly there were times when the hallways, you have to remind people. But I also, seeing that the data is going down in another direction, believe that we have accomplished what we wanted to accomplish during that time frame.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did we have any clusters, in-school clusters in January?
We did not have any in-school clusters in January. We had a cluster, two clusters at the beginning of the January timeframe, and they were sport related.
Right. And the kids weren't wearing masks there.
They may not have actually been during practices or things of that nature, because it actually came off the vacation time frame.
In Hampshire.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no classroom,
Okay.
which is different.
We
did, that is a data point that I did not put up here. We did not have clusters in the school during that time frame, whereas we had in both November and December.
Charlie, did you have a question too?
Comments?
Comments? Yeah, questions or comments? Yes.
It's my understanding that the masking mandate expires today,
Today, yep.
and unless we take other action, are you going to recommend any other action?
I am not recommending any other action at this point in time. I again feel that the data is inconclusive enough. The data that apart from the fact that you're right, we did not have clusters internally. I do believe that our protocols and practices in all other areas are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And with the decrease across the board, I believe that our school data is going to be similar to that, as it suggests, because it has been similar to the state data all along.
So on the agenda, under number 6 discussion, we have COVID-19 data and mitigation strategies. So at that point, we'll have a little more discussion about this. But let's move on with the superintendent's report.
Sure. Last thing, I'm not going to report on this last piece. I'm going to have the Director of Student Services talk about this one, but it is only one slide, just a lot of information on the slide. And so if you can give Jen Horn your attention, I'm sure she'd appreciate it.
So as we talk about every year, we never know when we'll be one step closer to needing that reserve fund. And every year we get ourselves out of that because we're awesome. This year is a little bit different, which we kind of knew at the beginning. Right now, our our current financial commitment in order to fulfill what we currently know we have to fulfill is $440,000 and some change. That again, we've talked about this a great deal. That's the out-of-district placement costs of new out-of-district placements, as well as incredible increases. Transportation costs have gone up to some degree, as well as additional runs, and the contracted service costs, just the cost of doing business has gone up. In order to offset that, if I leverage the IDA funds that we get grants from the federal government. We have about $114,000 left in the 2 grants that we currently have. If we leave 20,000 of that for emergencies, keeping in mind that from now to the end of the school year, if we had an additional out-of-district cost, that's about a $30,000 cost right now. So if we leave 20,000 in for emergencies, that gives us $94,000 that we can leverage. And then we also got ARP funds this year because the government is fully aware of the difficulties that schools are facing. And that's about $83,000 more for us to leverage, which puts us at a need after that of $263,000 and some change. So based on all of that, what I would be requesting at this point is a $260,000 that you consider a $260,000 transfer from the reserve fund. Keeping in mind, just so that you're aware, where we are right now, just in my uncommitted special ed budget is about $38,000. And that's what we have left. And that's as of today. We continually get orders in or things that need to be addressed and adjusted. So questions on that?
Any questions, comments on the special services here?
So you're looking for $260,000 out of the
Reserve.
special ed reserve. And just for people who don't know what student services is, could you just describe what you mean by out of district placement?
Sure. Student services does the special ed costs. So students that need to be educated in places that have different and more significant or specialized programming. So we have students that we send all over New Hampshire within an hour radius of New Hampshire and Massachusetts schools, as well as some students that are placed in places where they live there because of the types of needs that they have.
And that decision to do an outplacement is not made just for a happenstance.
Those decisions are always made by a team, which is legally required. That includes the parents and the school. So teachers and parents come together and make decision about the best place to get a student educated based on their needs. And they are legally required. Once that process has been done, that is what we are mandated to do.
So you have no choice. I mean, this is a process, and the end result of the process. The process results in an out-of-district placement. By law, we're required to do that.
Correct. And I will go back to what Ruben said earlier. We are legally, but also morally obligated to provide the least restrictive environment and best education that we can for all students. And sometimes that's not here.
In our conversations as well, and we've been through this with some, finance committees and so forth, but, that $440,000 that's over, we would have most likely hit our, we would have been fine with our budget in a normal type of situation. Would have been closer than perhaps every other year that we've had, but we had been kind of wanting to make sure that we were ensuring our budget was appropriate and not asking for too much in the first place. So I think we've done mathematically a really good job that way. The costs went out of control this year, which is why our conversation earlier about the budget increases. Can you just describe just a couple of those items that went significantly up? Not obviously specific, because we can't give that type of identifiable information, but I think it's important for people to know.
So I think a couple of things that I can talk to. One is that the state of New Hampshire has increased, the DOE increased rates for residential placements without input from schools, but definitely input from those placements. And for us, that was a 200% increase. And a residential placement is fairly expensive to begin with. That's a substantial amount. That's about half of that cost is an increase that we were, here it is in July. We could not prepare for it. We didn't even know it was coming. The transportation costs, for years, the bus company didn't charge us for one of our runs. And they found that this year, and we should pay for that. The other piece is, for years, they didn't charge us if the bus didn't run. So if a learner or two were not on a specific bus, they didn't charge us for that run, but they were paying the bus drivers. And the bus company has caught that as well. So there's some discrepancy there in what we've paid in the past and what we morally should be paying now. And then our contracted service costs are a substantial amount, and those are areas of significant need, legally required to have services, and finding those services within a teacher's contract amount are just almost impossible. We've also had, I will go back to the social emotional needs and the conversation that we keep having about cutting staff. Our learners are coming in with a lot of needs, and those needs are, some of those needs have been very expensive for us this year. And that's just what it is. But the social emotional impact of COVID cannot be swept under the rug. It's costly. And if we don't provide the services up front, it's going to be a long-term issue.
I just want to check in, make sure my memory is serving me correctly. The amount we currently have in the reserve fund is 500?
I think it's 400.
400?
For about 410,000.
400. Okay, so we're taking more than half of it out. Yes. 2/3 of it, basically.
That's the request.
Yes. Yeah, that's, I just want to make sure that's what.
When
Okay.
looking at this, sometimes you might ask, like, what's happening with the budget in other areas? We can say that from a staffing standpoint, we've gone through the money that is unencumbered and left over to, and we're searching for those positions right now. And we should be within 5,000 to 10,000 in either direction, should we hire those positions. Some of those are custodians, some of them are instructional associates, and so forth. Secretaries, administrative assistants. It's hard to find a lot of positions right now, but we still have to actively seek for those.
Yes.
We do have another couple $100,000 across all the schools in other types of, non-person, non-employee, spending, curriculum, professional development, things of that nature. That's for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of the two pockets right there that we might have money left over at the end of the year to cover this. But in the meantime, we've got to pay the
We've gotta pay the
bills.
bills,
Yep.
right.
And if we have money left over, the board has the opportunity to make some decisions with that.
Charlie?
So, given these cost increases and the efforts that we have to go through to tap into reserve funds from this year, what impact has that had on the 22-23 budget?
This is a very good question. The budget, the operating budget is scheduled to support the learners that we know we need. As it's stated now. So next year is also likely going to be tight, but we've been tight before. We've never been quite like this. The addition of only 75,000 to refresh makes me nervous, but
Up the top of your head, what part of the budget increase next year is attributable to special ed increases?
I think we said it was around $825,000, was it not? It was between that and $1 million.
between that and $1 million was just these costs. Yeah,
So those are the expenses that we would have to fund out of the budget, regardless of what the budget is.
yes.
To
Well,
have to,
Because they're
yeah,
mandatory.
legally binding, yeah.
So that's one of the things, if somebody decides to amend the budget and cut it down to default, you still have to pay that $820,000.
Yes.
felt it was important that people.
Yeah, I
understand.
mean, the only way to do that is to take away from programming, like regular ed programming, and well, obviously, it could be programming or staff. Yep, I mean, if it's staff, it almost always is programming at the same time.
Right.
There are a lot of different approaches you can take. We're not going to mention those approaches or anything like that. That's fear mongering. That's not appropriate. You know, we're just trying to be. It's not even our decision to make. The decision will be with another board after, the month of March. So. It's,
Yeah, but I do think that it's
yeah.
important for people to understand the rationale for the budget increase, because we've got $820,000 increase in special ed that we cannot remove from the budget. So if you reduce the budget, that $820,000 is going to still be in there. So you're going to have to cut $820,000 someplace else.
Right.
This definitely falls into a fixed cost, although our costs change. It cannot not be covered.
Any other questions or comments? All right,
Thank you.
thanks very much. Okay. That's everything for the superintendent's report.
Yep.
Okay. So we're ready to move on.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Leisha, you make the motion to accept the consent agenda. Second, please, someone. Christine, thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Oppose, abstain, that carries 600. And we're on to item number 6, which is the discussion of the COVID-19 data and mitigation strategies. So thoughts from the board? Anything around, Charlie?
Yeah, for me, I think the data is interesting, but I'm not gonna, I think it's a moot issue as to whether or not it supports the original action. I think it's only gonna be important if we go back to try to do mandate masks, from my perspective.
Mhm.
Right? I think we just move on, do away with the mask mandate, and continue on according to the matrix that we have in place.
Thank you. Other thoughts, comments, questions about things?
I guess just like shared at past meetings, I think we need to follow the matrix that we agreed to with the community.
Okay. Christine?
Well, I agree with what's been said. I also just want to throw out that I understand we've heard from many people that cloth masks like I'm wearing are not very effective. And that, many of us have tried to buy the other masks, but we're back ordered or whatever. But anyway, I'm very proud of our students for coming to school for the last month wearing masks, even though they didn't want to. It shows that they are learning a sense of responsibility towards their community. And even if these masks were not the most effective masks out there, they did it. And I'm very, very proud of our learners for following the rules.
Thanks. Anyone else? Well, I will just say I'm glad that things lightened a bit with I think our staff absenteeism as well. I know that it's been really, really difficult, and I know it's going to continue to be really difficult because we don't have the subs that we would like to have. But we're not alone. The whole country is experiencing that phenomenon. But I just hear from so many people, either my kid has not been with a teacher, they've been, the library doing whatever, they're not learning. That kind of frustration because the staff's absent. Also that staff is trying to cover for other staff because there are no substitutes, which is a rough situation. And so if the wearing of the mask has helped a bit with that, I'm really glad that it has. I'm also really glad that we didn't have any clusters. That's a positive. We're trying really hard not to have the in-school transmission. So, but in terms of, you know, where the spike is and where it's at now, yeah, back to the matrix and hope that the next variant, just wish it would end. I'll just give an amen to that and be done. All right, so I guess we don't have to take a motion or anything because it expires today. And for now. Okay, great. Let's move on then to, was it number 7? The presentation. It's the middle and high school program of studies.
Thank you. I'll just wait till Nick's ready. Okay, so we're here to present the annual program of studies for the next school year. It's myself, the principal, David Dustin.
Kim Baker, Director of Counseling. Heather Schulman, Assistant Principal of Teaching and Learning.
So we just wanted to go through, we made some, I guess, larger volume of changes this year to accomplish some of our longer term goals. So I'll just outline some of those on the next slide here. You know, one of our goals continuously is to do better, turning this into one sort of consistent middle high school experience that allows our middle school learners some of the identity with that's important to being in the middle school and the development that comes there, but also making sure that our staff and physical plant resources support both middle and high school learners across the board. And so we worked this year to combine the JRMS and CHS program of studies documents, which were previously separate, into one document that allows for families and learners to sort of look at the entire range of 6 through 12 opportunities and make some decisions about their pathway from there. We also worked to synthesize some of our policies and procedures, many of which were duplicate or were extremely similar in the two documents, into one consistent system. In some situations, that's obviously not practical because there are some different needs in the middle school versus the high school, but pretty much, you know, the vast majority of those things we were able to bring into one consistent system. We worked on just general clarification of the language and clarification of sort of how the documents read, and then updated a lot of our descriptions and prerequisites from some of our courses to better reflect the actual learning goals that have been bundled in those courses over the last couple of years. So one of our goals, again, is to really make these documents usable for all middle and high school learners, but especially for defining and developing pathways as we continue to grow those for our learners. We looked at 3 sort of areas this year to drive some of our course changes in particular. And I know that's usually a big piece of what we present is changes to the programs to better meet the needs of our learners. One of the things we looked at were some of the course enrollment trends. Are there patterns that we're noticing with courses that haven't run for several years, for example, or on the flip side, courses whose growth has really been skyrocketing? So maybe adding another advanced course beyond that becomes appropriate. Some examples of that one, you know, we've reduced some of our English 12 offerings because we just weren't getting the learner interest to run those courses. But on the flip side, with some of our art courses and cooking and things like that, we've added some advanced options for learners because of the interest. We also look at the college career planning trends. This year was the first year of our freshman foundations program, for example. So we've gotten to see how some of those personal learning plans are developing, some of the things that they're saying they would like to see. And those pieces of data always inform how we grow our programs and continue to develop them. Our counseling team has also worked a lot this year to bring in more college visits, military rep visits, and to reach out to local community partners for career options as well. And lastly, several of our teams used survey data to gather information on their current course load. Our science team in the high school was the biggest example of this. They literally surveyed the student population and got a sense of where those interests were going to be going forward. So we tried to use these 3 different data points to really drive the changes to our programs that we're hoping to offer in the coming school year. And I sort of mentioned this, but we've been doing a lot of work to develop our college and career pathways and think of how we can better prepare learners and support those things going forward. Again, a lot of that included the career ELO partnerships that our ELO coordinator, Dana Jackson, has been working on, really asking some of those individuals what they wish that we would do better in terms of preparing learners. So we've adjusted some of our math offerings, for example, to reflect that. Lots of interactions and conversations with college and military reps to make sure our programming supports that future career possibility, as well as that career explorations course. So this kind of gives the foundation for the changes that we're addressing. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Baker to come over now and talk about some specific JRMS items.
Thank you. So I'm just going to highlight some of the changes we're seeing at the middle school. We're adding woodworking for an 8th grade option. We have a very large 7th grade, about 114 learners, and just looking ahead at being able to meet the needs of our learners, but also providing some early access to programs that would help them explore high school courses. We have the fundamentals construction trades class. And so this would give learners access to what that may look like if they're interested in continuing after 8th grade in the field of woodworking, also getting into the classroom area just to get a better sense of what it would look like as an 8th grader, but also moving forward as they plan ahead. We spent a lot of time looking at the music courses, really looking at that enrollment data from the last 3 years. And based on that, we decided we're using the word retire courses. So they're coming offline for next year, but we have the opportunity to revisit that based on student interest. So these are the music courses, general music courses in the middle school that we will continue to offer that seem to have the largest number of interest. Students have really been talking a lot about these courses. They're really excited about them. They have really strong enrollment and interest. So we'll continue to offer those next year. Unusual team sports was a new course one of the things that we're seeing at the middle school is a need for a lot of movement. And so unusual team sports is just another opportunity for students who really like physical education, who need that as part of their day, to have a different course, an elective type course that they can choose to take. Doing something a little different with our sequencing with world language. Currently this year, our 6th graders take a semester of world language explorations. And as a 7th grader, they were taking 1 semester in the past. And then as an 8th grader, they take a full year. I think ultimately the goal was to have our 7th and 8th graders take world language for 2 years, like Spanish 1. I'll use this as an example, Spanish 1 and Spanish 2. They would earn 2 credits of world language once they complete that 2nd year as an 8th grader. And we want to kind of move back to that goal. And in that also provide some additional opportunity for our 6th graders to take some elective courses, some UA courses to kind of break up their academic day to provide more movement. So world language explorations will no longer be offered for 6th graders. 6th graders won't be required to take a world language, but 7th and 8th graders will take a full year. This also, what we're seeing is students are really interested in a 3rd, 4th, even a 5th year of a world language. And if they're not starting until they get to 9th grade, it's challenging for them to get through that level of language. So this would allow that flexibility. We're also seeing students who want to take Spanish for a few years and then opt into Mandarin Chinese. And we're seeing some of that by providing this opportunity for our 7th and 8th graders to take that high school level language for 2 years before they are officially high school students, it provides them more flexibility at high school. Talked about this just a few minutes ago. A lot of movement. Our 6th graders really need that movement. They need that team building. They need that self-care, that health and wellness piece. So we're moving towards with pulling the world language explorations offline for our 6th graders, allows us to offer wellness as a full year course. And so those are the main changes with grade 6.
We've been very busy amending the program studies for the high school learners. In English, we are offering an honors option within the journalism course. Due to low enrollment and decreasing learner interest, we are removing 2 English 12 courses, Classics for College and Forward to the Past. English, we've added Literature of a Witness, a half-credit elective, all based on learner interest and voice. In science, remove 2 courses, Microbiology, Comparative Anatomy, and Advanced Biology Honors, low enrollment. Instead, the learners are showing us they have passions and interests in other areas of science, environmental science, New England ecology, marine biology, the chemistry of cooking, and we have astronomy that we have adjusted from a full year to a half-year course to allow for additional electives. This is quite a challenge for our science teachers at the high school level to be able to teach all those different courses and prepare for that. So it's very exciting. We've added yearbook as a full year course. The kids, this is their book, their memory is a yearbook. It should be in the hands of the learners. And as such, we've created a course. Family and consumer science, we removed the less popular interior design and added advanced cooking. If you're ever in the building and you're smelling in the hallways, the aromas of all the food, when it's not a day when things are burnt, it's a wonderful smell. Oh my goodness, our STEM pathways. STEM is the future. And we've added computer science, robotics, sustainability. Those are specific pathways. Our teachers will be engaging in some heavy duty, severe training in order to be able to teach these courses. Very exciting. Construction trades. Oh, it's wonderful. We've added the plumbing and electrical modules for next year. And what we've done to allow learners to be exposed to more variety of trades is we have combined, in consultation with our construction trades teacher, that the carpentry and masonry would be taught within a single semester, and then the plumbing and electrical within a single semester, so that the learners will have exposure to a wide variety. And depending what they like the best, they can further their education in that one area.
I just want to jump in because, you know, a couple of the things that we're presenting with these changes are adjustments. So for example, when you look at the 6th grade language shifting to 7th grade instead, we're still keeping the same amount of time of language instruction, but based on how this year has gone and what we saw as the needs for 6th graders, compressing that into 7th grade for language was the same amount of time, just used a little bit differently. The STEM pathways is a little bit different. You know, this is becoming the core of a lot of opportunity for learners, and we're looking at folding in the A portion of STEM and making it STEAM. And we already have, you know, if you look at our art classes this year, they're bursting at the seams almost across the board, to the point that learners are asking us for more and more and more. And, you know, sometimes I have to push back because I can't buy another 20 digital cameras, for example. But, you know, that is the core of. No, not this year. No,
out of the budget.
So, you know, the STEM pathways and eventually STEAM does lead to a lot of opportunities for learners in all different avenues of future careers and future possible pathways for them. We asked the STEM team this year to really focus on defining completable pathways in as many different STEM opportunities as they believe we can currently sustain. So robotics, unfortunately, is off the list. You know, we tried it this year. As they were working in the high school on that robotics strand, the costs to get that program off the ground would be much more than I could stomach as the principal right now, coming to the board and asking for. And we saw interest in the computer science and sustainability being much higher. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think about robotics and automation down the line. It just wasn't where the priorities would be for this, you know, the next couple of years at least. So we have fully articulated, and they're in the program of studies. It was just too much to put up here. Fully articulated pathways that the team came up with using some really high quality curriculum that's nationally recognized through Project Lead the Way in computer science and sustainability. That would include a fundamentals class, which last year we said would meet our computer science requirement, and we're still sticking with that for the 2 pathways. And then additional courses Learners can choose to specialize in that pathway before doing their capstone as their senior sort of piece. And a learner who completes all of that gets a designation on their transcript, diploma, et cetera, to say that they've done a specialization in this STEM pathway. So for next year, we're only adding one course to the computer science pathway because we need to do a lot more PD work and curriculum planning and things like that. And then adding the environmental science course in partnership with the science team in the high school. And then if you look in the following year, there's at least 2 or 3 additional courses in each of those pathways that we'll be rolling out and things like that. So we're moving forward. We just had to take a little half step back because I think my ambition for this got a little ahead of the rest of us. So, and then with construction trades, you know, this is the first year that that program was in place. And what the teacher discovered in his professional development and connections with other people who do these programs is that we really don't need a full semester for each module. So again, through some of that curriculum revision and things like that, it's great news because it means we'll get more learners through the program each year. But next year we should have all 4 modules ready to go under that teacher's direction and things like that. So just wanted to put that stuff out there that, you know, we're looking at these things again to really improve how we can access these programs for our kids.
So I just wanted next is to talk a little bit about the New Hampshire Scholars Program. I think that's the next slide. So there actually are 4 pathways to be recognized as a New Hampshire Scholar. And really the purpose and the goal of New Hampshire Scholar is to encourage and recognize students who take courses over and above what's required for graduation. So it's, for example, in a standard, it's encouraging students to take courses like Algebra 2 or beyond, taking science classes past chemistry, taking world language, even though it's not part of graduation requirements. And this kind of supports what David was just speaking about is the STEM. So there's the standard, which is currently in the program of studies. But in addition to that, there's a STEM pathway, which builds off of the standard requirements. But by taking STEM classes here at Conant High School, they can be recognized as STEM. Same with art. There's an art pathway. By taking art courses, you can be recognized as an art scholar. And then there's the career pathways, which is really interesting and provides learners with lots of opportunities to be recognized as a New Hampshire Scholar by completing a CTE program, by participating in work-based learning, by doing things like ELOs. So really it provides an opportunity for students in all areas and all interests, and by taking core academic classes, by challenging themselves to take more than the standard diploma requirements to be recognized as a New Hampshire Scholar, which also does go on their diploma. There's a designation. There can be scholarship money, additional opportunities for after they graduate, fee waivers for college applications. There's just some things that are helpful and important and available to students by participating in New Hampshire Scholars. And so all 4 of the pathways will be in the program of studies, and school counselors will help kind of guide learners, starting with freshman year based on the classes that they're taking and the classes that they're interested in. Just some additional changes that you'll see in the program of studies. Currently, we do, some teachers are using the 1 to 4 proficiency scale to rate summative assessments, but they're still grading on the traditional 100-point scale. So you'll see the conversion chart in the program of studies. So if a learner is getting a 2, they can look at the conversions chart and see what that means for a numerical grade based on the 100-point scale. So we've added that. We're no longer printing and mailing home progress reports. We're really encouraging learners to get on Web to School, to be checking their grades on a more consistent basis. And it's really interesting because in the school counseling department, we have all the student passwords, and we're seeing a lot more learners come in and ask for their passwords that they've forgotten or they haven't logged in a while. So really kind of encouraging them to check their progress, not just every few weeks, but on a regular basis. So that's been really helpful. We're still mailing home report cards. So, and that will be next week is our next report card. We spent a lot of time looking at GPA language and what that looks like for learners. So currently, if a learner comes in, takes a college class and transfers that grade in, they get the weight of what a CCP class. And so we are looking to change that. So we're proposing that all transfer credits earn the same GPA weight as the identical courses here at the high school. So if a student takes a college English class and transfers that in, they get the same weight as an AP course. If a learner is coming in from another high school and they've taken an honors level course, that course would get the same weight as an honors course here. So those are changes. And then we are going to be calculating GPA at the end of all courses. So at the end of each semester, so twice a year, the cumulative GPA based on final grades. And some of this is cleanup of language. It's not necessarily all changes. It's just some cleanup that we're doing. Do you want me to talk to this? So our ultimate goal, this is our timeline, and really our ultimate goal is for learners to leave at the end of the school year with their schedule. And actually maybe a few weeks before school ends, so that if there's a concern, a question, a change that needs to be made, school counselors and learners and families can have those conversations. That they're not receiving that schedule in the mail in the middle of the summer, reaching out to the department, trying to make contact and make changes. And we just think that this allows for more communication, collaboration with learners and families and with teachers. It also does allow our teachers to potentially see their class rosters and see their classes and have an opportunity to know that before they leave for the summer. So our hope is that the program of studies would be approved in February. We would then have a pretty quick turnaround time, share that information with families and learners. In March, counselors will meet with learners to review options, and teachers would put in recommended courses for next year. In April, course requests from learners are placed in the system. In May, we'll complete the master schedule. We'll build that. And then in June, everybody would receive their schedules and with some time to still meet with learners and families before they leave for the summer. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
I have a quick question. Well, go ahead, you start.
I had a comment and a question, so you can go ahead.
No, you. go.
Okay, I'll go.
Please.
I'll just start. We can go around the table. I just want to say I look forward to the program of studies every year, and every year it just keeps getting better and better and better. You guys have just done such an amazing job with this. I'm so excited to see the proficiency conversion chart. I love all the pathways. Like, this makes me excited for my children to get to high school, because like they can know what they're doing afterwards. It's really beautiful, and I commend you all and everybody who's been involved in developing this. It's really amazing, and I'm very excited about it. My question is, I have been dying to know, what are unusual team sports?
We don't know yet. That comes later. It's a surprise.
So, Heather Lindstad, the activities director, introduced a whole bunch of what I considered at the time to be very strange sports because I hadn't heard of them. Chook Ball is an example of one of these sports. It involves some sort of different shaped stick and bopping balls around. I don't know. The kids love it. Whenever they play it, they get really into it. They have different versions of like basketball that melds with dodgeball. So they're practicing throwing and catching skills, but using basketball backstops and things like that. So it's interesting twists on things like that.
Okay.
And a lot of times learners who have already taken PE classes, I've noticed that the teacher this year of some of these other courses brings those learners in too, and they kind of help teach them, which is neat.
Awesome.
I just want to thank you for your comment earlier about the program of studies. And I love the program of studies too. I spent a lot of time with it. But I think one of the things we're most excited about in bringing the middle school and high school into one place is that kind of looking ahead, being excited. I always say to learners, go through, like, highlight or circle everything that you are interested in, that you think you might want to take, and just explore all the options. And I think, especially with our 7th and 8th graders, 6th graders, their schedules are pretty set, but encouraging those 7th and 8th graders to like think ahead, to plan ahead, see all the amazing opportunities that you offer here in your district. So thank you for that.
And it's not just academic focus.
Right.
Like I think in this community especially, that's so important. And that's why this is just so beautifully done.
Yeah.
So I'll stop now.
Thank you, Alicia. There's one other thing that you had said that I think is really important, and it's an easy to overlook addition to the program of study, which is that conversion chart. Actually, we have, I would say, almost universally in our middle school at this point, and a good chunk of our high school teachers are using the learning progressions and using the scales on the learning progressions, which is really important. And our math team, 6 through 12, but especially in the middle school, really spent a lot of time working with Heather this summer and with Ruben, aligning testing data with corresponding, 0 to 100 grades. And there's a pretty big gap. We have learners who, we've said this before, we're getting 100 in a course or getting an A or a B in a course, but are on standardized tests showing us 1s or 2s in a lot of areas of math skills, for example. And by having teachers having a clearer sense of what that level 4 really looks like when you're grading an assessment, already some of our math teachers have seen a difference in their ability to more accurately report the math skills of learners and support their learning. So the goal with that, the teachers worked on that over the last several years, actually, but getting it in there, getting it consistent and clear should help even more teachers make that jump over to using the learning scales as we get closer and closer to using Otis and things like that.
And families understand.
Yeah,
Right.
And children learn.
And children learn, yes.
Right. Absolutely.
Wow.
So thank you for mentioning that. And thank you for being a program of studies geek with us.
And though it's only kind of related, am I correct in saying that as they shift toward the use of the 4, 3, 2, 1, which is more accurate than the 0 to 100 anyway, and I think more helpful in working on improvement, that's going to correspond with the usage of our LMS?
Correct. Yep. We've got several teams next year who have continued to indicate that they would like to fully use our LMS of Otis next year, and they've asked for training to make that happen. And they would like to use a fully standards-based reporting system that allows them to report the 1 through 4 on report cards versus 0 to 100. So I get goosebumps at the numbers of teams that have actually come forward. It's a little overwhelming. We had a meeting today and more teams than I expected. We could be looking at a pretty good chunk of the school next year really wanting to use Otis as their learning management system and reporting only 1 through 4 grades, which is huge progress. One of the things one of our math teachers said, which was really interesting, and she's sort of shown it in the work she's doing, is thinking about that level 4 in particular and thinking about what that requires, which is transfer of knowledge, pulling in other skills that were previously taught, applying without teacher intervention the skills that were done at a higher level of thinking. This teacher has actually been able to write specific questions that reach that level 4 level of thinking. And the challenge to learners has been incredible, but it's allowed her to tailor teaching to some of those higher achieving learners as well. And she sort of did an experiment where she scored the test over here, 0 to 100, no, 1 through 4, anything, and then broke it down 1 through 4, wrote specific questions, scored the same tests, and had almost identical results, and said this was a lot easier for her to prepare and teach. So they're seeing the benefit of that, and we kind of have to do our part in getting that written in language that everyone can see and expect and so on.
I too am a program of studies geek and look at
Excellent.
it and like, ooh, what do we get today? Like, how is this going to happen? Not much to the chagrin of my son, but the thing, a couple things I want to point out, like, do not slow your roll with regard to the financial algebra and your career math. I have heard so much from parents and students that they really want applicable math. It's obviously a perennial issue. And I really applaud whatever the teacher is that's going into that universe. And I think giving flexible options, not everyone's going to do physics, not everyone's going to do calculus, certainly not, some of us who are math averse, but learning how to use it in a business sense or see it from a worldview is really beneficial. So I see you want to talk about that. Talk about that. Yeah.
One of, again, the math department surveyed learners last year, asked what they wanted, and the kids said that they wanted to learn real world math application. And so a teacher worked on creating the curriculum for the career math. And it's a little different than the financial algebra. It's less of an algebraic type of math course. It's more real world. And the numbers are showing that the kids are interested in it and it's working out well.
That's great.
And we're constantly looking for ways to increase our math offerings and get away from the geometry sandwich, the algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, because studies show that the kids really need a different type of math preparation. So we're moving toward that direction slowly, all based on research.
Well, I think
you're more likely to have 4 years of math if you're offering things like that than a require series like. Yeah. The other observation I wanted to make is I'm gonna kind of keep pushing the history piece, and starting next July 2023, there's the pass requirement for the class of 2024 to pass the US citizenship thing. So I'll be paying attention at home next year when you do this again to see how the civics aligns with that exam and when that exam exists, because if it's in May, that would be tragic if someone didn't get a 70 or better and didn't pass their high school requirements because of that test, as honorable as they attempted it to be. So I'm just going to watch that carefully.
Yeah.
Since history didn't make it on your presentation, and God love the history department, I'm sorry you didn't. Maybe you need to have any changes.
Hey, that's my old department. So, you know, the team for social studies had looked at maybe retiring a couple of courses, but we didn't see a justification with the numbers to do that, honestly. And one of the courses that they had wanted to potentially retire was the Lost and Found course, which is surveying skills, understanding maps, understanding how we measure and think of civic engineering and things like that. And I see those skills. I know technology does some of those pieces, but the thinking behind it, the creative problem solving behind it, those are too valuable of skills to just give up. So I spoke with the teacher of the course currently. We're going to look at some different ideas for that for next year. I know that the current civics teacher and the team has already been looking at the citizenship sort of requirement for tests, and he's actually planning on implementing that this year, even though it's not required yet, to see how it goes and then analyze some of the data that comes from that and make sure that we're ready for next year.
That's what I make the class of 2024 the guinea pigs.
Right.
For this, please.
Yeah, no, we're plugging away now to make sure that's not the case, because, you know, we don't want to see somebody on a single test. That honestly, if that happens,
discipline, absolutely no other discipline.
Right.
Requires. It's gonna be required. Sorry.
So that's a great point. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
This is my favorite day of the year. Not the budget one, the one where we're actually talking about the kids' class.
Talking about teaching and learning. It's
You have a comment?
Question.
Question? Go for
Is
it.
it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. How does this right here align? You guys have been kind of in the midst, and we haven't really talked a ton about it yet. How does this align with the work you're doing with your accreditation? Which your accreditation is going to be the whole school.
correct. Yeah, we're continuing with our NEASC process for the middle and high school, which is it's great. You know, it's a great unifying exercise. It's great that the middle school is also now, you know, there's a lot of great stuff that they've been doing, but having that same standard from the outside that's applied that allows us to look at growth has been really exciting. We're nearing the end of the report writing process for what's called the collaborative conference. So this year is sort of a check-in. We self-report on where we think we're at on the standards. A visiting team will come in, review our report, have some conversations with various different groups, look at the learning environment, things like that, and make some recommendations for priority areas that we would then implement for the next couple of years before the actual visit, which is in 2023. 2024. So far, a lot of the priority areas that the teams are identifying are matching in with the work that we're demonstrating here. You know, thinking about rigor, for example, and how we incorporate higher levels of thinking across more of our courses is one of the areas that we're already seeing just from the consistency of the documentation and the learning objectives in classes and things like that. That's an area that I can already tell is going to be a focus. And we're trying to already think of some of that stuff here. Looking at the personalization of our pathways and thinking of more opportunities for learners is going to, and every school is kind of a focus point. You know, that's something we'll certainly have here. We're going to be, you know, looking at a vision of the graduate that pulls our strategic design into language that's more usable for the school and shorter. So that's something that every school has to have for this accreditation. We'll be doing some of that work. So this aligns really nicely. We'll have a lot more to do next year. So Program of Studies Day next year should be fun also, but this is supportive of that work, which is nice.
Charlie, any questions or comments, Charlie?
No, other than, I think it's great. I think we should probably read off the delivered presentation with the work that they've accomplished. But I think it's impressive. I did have one question. I did a search on the program of studies that was online, and I couldn't find your book.
That's a course that is not currently offered at all. It's an after-school club. So we're looking to add it in as a new one for this. Are you saying in the one that we shared with you, you didn't see the course in there?
The one that is in the agenda.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. That might have been missed. We definitely would like to add that as a course. So I thought we had that in there, but we'll take a peek.
What's the description for your book?
Grades 10, yeah,
Please.
and you're offering it for grades 10 through 12.
Correct.
Yeah, so it is, it's on page 65.
Page 65.
Ask the library.
She is, yeah,
why-
I was gonna say,
So
she had a
why
ringer.
doesn't- so why doesn't
Special,
my
a ringer over
science
there.
Control F.
find it?
Did you have a question or comment? Do. Okay. So when can we start signing up? Because I really want to do the literature of witness. Yeah. And the advanced cooking. More. Okay.
We'll get you your forms.
Thank you. Okay. GPA calculation. So if I'm correct, all my kids have graduated, all 5, so this wasn't as important, but I remember it being extremely important. That first quarter GPA to get your college applications in was crucial. So does this mean that starting this year, all juniors will need to use their June GPA for their college application?
Yeah, just hand it off, nice. Very slick.
Yes, because it's a cumulative GPA and cumulative GPAs are based on final grades. So that's what they're using, which determines the rank in class. And when we report it, it asks when, when's the last time it was updated? So we would say based on the end of junior year. And then we provide a mid-year transcript too. So we're getting ready to do that. So after we do report cards and get those out, then we'll go in and we'll send all the schools updated transcripts. We'll have updated GPAs and class ranks on them.
I hope that lightens the load in the fall for the guidance just a little bit at that point. Just
Thank
make
you.
sure your juniors have that drilled into them.
Yes.
With their
Yes.
scholarships, that this one actually counts.
Yeah.
Can't, okay, that's a big one.
Yeah, and so we'll go over that in all our junior meetings when we talk about course selections and do our post-secondary planning with them. So that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a big
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
shift.
Yes.
People count on that quarter. Kudos on the sustainability strand. Mhm. Big kudos. With the STEM portion, you laugh at me for this. What work has been done? You had mentioned that robotics was being taken out. So, and it's done for 8th grade only, I saw. So when I looked at your computer science STEM strands and sustainability, the arts, cooking, we all know everything's incorporated, but the specific ones in that are heavily screen-based. I do not see, when I look at them, I see very little hands-on. When at the middle school level, you're saying how crucial the hands-on is. I know that it's also very, very important for me, and for all ages. And so it looks like that's being taken out, except for maybe a club. My concern is that what has been done to look at our local, incredibly tech-heavy industries surrounding us that are vibrant right now. And yes, I'm throwing Millipore under a bus because I know that they have a very active donation program. But I'm certain that New Hampshire Ball Bearing, Teleflex, Microspec, I'm certain these places would look to us if we said, we need some hands-on materials. We need some curriculum. Can you help us get it? What has been done to pursue these when we can't, we have a fascinating industry heavy place for this. What is being done to utilize that?
So, those are the options that we've talked about in future years to bring the robotics strand sort of more to fruition than we were able to do right now. Our teachers in this program are feeling a little bit overwhelmed with getting some of these other areas off the ground. So this year we have one teacher retiring out of that department, for example, which would only leave one current teacher in there. And she's feeling a lot of the pressure of making sure that these strands are off the ground. Outreach has already been done to sort of connect with local industry, mostly for the environmental sustainability strand, because that's an area that the team felt was doable in terms of the next year or two, getting it more off the ground. I know this year in that program, they went to the wastewater treatment plant in Jaffrey, met with the manager of that plant, did a tour, talked about the different types of learning that's required to run that sort of an infrastructure piece in a way that's environmentally sound. They went to, I think, 2 of the freshwater drilling wells that Jaffrey uses for its freshwater sort of delivery system. Again, talked about the technology, the chemistry behind it, did a tour of the plant, looked at the engineering aspects, and then came back to the classroom and designed some water systems that could work. Again, that's a hands-on component that isn't obvious looking at the course, but it's there. I know that the computer science strand, there's some designing of computers and things like that. There's some cybersecurity exercises that they actually try to break into each other's computer systems and then correct systems to deflect that. They do some coding work where they create things for other people in the class. So there's components that aren't obvious, I guess, looking on paper and looking on the program of studies that the team has intentionally developed to make sure that these are meeting a wide array of learners. They just did not feel that robotics right now, with the cost and the use of their current tool, which is Project Lead the Way, was sustainable with the current budget. Down the road, if we reached out and did make some of those connections, what you're kind of describing would also require those teachers to then learn that different type of curriculum, wherever that might come from, and adopt it. And it's not something our teachers felt like right now they could take on in addition to these other courses that are more mature. So you're exactly right. And I think that's where we're planning on going in the next couple of years. Exactly.
Thanks, Lisa. Christine, do you have any questions, comments?
Well, thank you. This is so exciting and positive. You know, we've been dealing with budgets stuff and masks for so long. It's amazing to think about
Education.
and beautiful education. I mean, you know, I'm very proud of what you have put together and what our learners have the opportunity to access. It's very impressive. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So I'm not going to reiterate all that, but just thumbs up. Question. I know that you talked about retiring courses so that at some point you could bring them back. So are there some that are going to be removed that it's like, you know what, I don't ever see us bringing this back, or are they all basically retired and leaving yourself open for the future?
Right now, we're considering them all retired. I think it's been an interesting last 2 years, right? So education has been interrupted. We've been remote. We've had a hybrid schedule, you know, so we're retiring them for now. We want to kind of get a better sense of where our learners are at, what they're most curious about, what they're most interested in, and with the option of bringing them back if we see a need for that. I think that what will happen is over the next year or two, if we're not seeing an increased interest, then we'll take them offline for good.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks so much. And it's exciting. It's fun to think about the possibilities. So, great. Thank you. Okay. Next, policy.
We have 4 exciting policies for your first read. The first one, the policy committee is very excited about because it is a policy that will outline basically just reminding the board to review our strategic plan on an annual basis. So if anyone has any questions about that.
Any
Hopefully
questions?
you've been able to read it.
What, KEC?
Nope, CA.
CA.
Okay.
EBB and GBA were both recommended revisions from our nursing staff. So we took their feedback and made these revisions. They're about AEDs and accident reporting. And KEC is a revision made about public concerns and complaints regarding instructional resources. And this revision was based on NHSBA policy.
Well, I do have some questions on that. Do you want to take them now or you want to?
Yeah, that's all I got. Brief
Okay.
overview.
You reference boards and committees. Do they exist today? Who's on them? How are they determined? I'm not familiar with those, so those are just questions.
Yeah, so we talked about this, but
Go ahead.
you look very interested. We talked about this in our committee meeting, and there has been some work done to make sure that those processes and plans are in place to address any said situations. So yes, I mean, the committee, it's not a standing committee. It would be organized if the need arises, but there are plans. And we even looked at some documents of how the review process would look like and what information would be collected in order to make any decision.
My thought is that we should make sure that we have the things in place before we enact policy.
I guess what other things are you looking for? Because we also felt the same, that we wanted to make sure that there were
The
structures
other
in
thing I'm
place.
concerned about is time.
Yeah,
Parent comes in with a complaint about something, okay? You have to wait for a committee to review it, and determine whether they're gonna take any immediate action. You're dependent on that committee getting together. So there's a time frame there, and if they get together and decide not to do it, it's 45 days. And all during this time, those materials are being used. So, I mean, I think that parents have an opt-out ability, which is one thing, right? But to have a complaint about the materials that are being broadly used across the potential of a lot of students, a lot of learners, could impact a lot of learners. I think we do need to have something that's a little bit more time sensitive. Just my opinion.
yeah, I hear that. I'll just reiterate that this timeframe was developed based on the information provided by the recommended NHSBA policy. And the committee felt like that was an appropriate length of time, so.
Okay. Anyone else about any of the policies, questions, comments, further, anything that Charlie was just talking about, or any of the others?
So the policy is our foundation for the school board, but it has numerous forms that are being drafted to make sure that there is an adequate timeline. A committee can't be named now because it depends on the school and the type of material being questioned. So that would be a principals and administrators prerogative to say, okay, so we need this many people from this segment because this is the area that the material being questioned, and that it would be researched. So it might even be outside people saying, this is why for curriculum this was used because this state recommended this because of these A, B, and C. So it'd be impossible to say, okay, the committee is going to consist of everything right now. It's really contingent upon the type of material, but there are forms backing this policy up. The legal form, the forms that lawyers through the school board association stuff take a look at just to make sure, okay, yeah, this is the perfect time frame. This is going to satisfy the route that we're going. This is how that can be contested. All of that is in place. It's being formulated. This is the first step of making sure that all those pieces are monitored and checks and balances are in place.
Well,
That's great, but personally, I would not put something online as a policy that our constituency, the parents look at and say, this is the policy, and they go to follow the policy and they find out the board doesn't exist, the timeframes can't be adhered to. So I mean, if we're going to put a policy in place, we should that prescribes something that we're going to implement, that we should be ready to implement it at the time in which we approve policy. That's just my.
So I think, so what Lisa's saying is we are ready to implement that because there's a procedure and supporting pieces of
I can't hear
documentation.
you.
So what Lisa's saying is that we are ready to implement this policy because there is already procedure and supporting documentation that oversees the process of this policy all ready to go. So all of that procedural sort of process stuff, while it's not attached to this policy because as we've talked about before, the policy drives the procedure, right, in the practice. But those pieces already exist. They've already been created. And as the policy committee, we reviewed those documents to ensure that this policy could be facilitated in practice.
The other policies that have procedures, the procedure is attached to or part of the policy, or the policy references the procedure. Okay, this policy talks about a board that I'm not familiar with. And that's why I asked the question, does the committee exist?
Because it's not a standing committee.
Is the committee
media
forming at some
review
point?
Right.
It's a media review committee. So it's a media review committee, and it doesn't exist continuously. It's an ad hoc committee that comes together when there's an issue. And currently, the current policy doesn't have a time frame, and it talks about a selection committee. It doesn't talk about media review committee. So we're actually tweaking it to improve the language so that it's more in line with what the state board is recommending. And I hear what you're saying, but what Lisa's saying is how, if you had a science textbook, you would need to have people who are able to speak to that textbook, not a standing committee that has people who don't know anything about science.
Well, I disagree.
Okay.
I believe that you don't need a standing committee, but you need a process that a timely fashion, okay, is formed, and you have a procedure to do that, and you can reference that procedure. If I'm a parent, and I look at this policy, it just tells me this committee is going to give me a result in 45 days unless they decide to do otherwise. Now, I agree, the old policy was not implementable anyway.
Okay, thank you. At least
Okay.
we're trying to make an improvement, Charlie.
I-
I don't know
I
where you're
absolutely-
arguing.
I absolutely think it's an improvement.
Oh, good. Yay, high five.
My concern is approving a policy before, if the procedure's there, send me a copy of the procedure. I'll be
Okay.
happy.
Is it, I don't know if there's anything here that would be like a table or an appendix or anything like that. Would be attached. I don't know. I'm just asking. Maybe that's what.
We would have documents if we were to decide to put procedures, call them, I don't know, what is the letter on this,
It's
KEC?
not our practice to
It
support
isn't.
documents.
It isn't
So
our practice
no.
currently.
Okay.
But there are, places that have like KEC-R, and it's the,
I mean, if the majority of the board feels like we need to really flesh out what that process looks like, this can come back to the committee. I guess I'm curious if that is the case.
and I see also that it has a tight time frame. 45 days, school days may not seem like, oh, that's a long time. Because there are a lot of things that we have in policy that have timeframes that are going on simultaneously. And 45 days is, I mean, Jen could probably speak best to 45 days and how fast that is to get things done for her. Yeah.
Say calendar days or.
School days.
School days. Yeah.
So 45 school days is longer, but it does go insanely fast. when you're trying to do something.
But the,
But it says they have to do that and provide a report.
Right, so it's talking about the completed form. And that form is,
We have forms, but the principal, upon receipt of completed request of that, then kicks off the whole process after that.
okay, so as long as the form exists.
I believe that's, some of these are the ones that we looked
Right, I'm
at,
not
and we
sure
want
what
to
we
have
wanna
some
do, yeah.
questions on a couple of items, but yeah, there are several forms that
They were,
exist.
yeah, none of the questions were, I mean,
Okay.
they're like 6 forms.
Yeah,
Alright.
there, 5 to 6 forms already.
Anything else on KEC or any of the others at this point? First reading.
Just, can I just say something real fast to CA? If we go back to that one real fast, just as a point of the red in there speaks to the importance of really having a solid plan. What you heard tonight was people articulating what's going to happen over the next several years. People come and people go, but the bulk of your organization will remain, and they need to keep on moving forward. So we have a 44-page plan right now. We've kept it in draft form all year long because it's been an interesting year. We're making adjustments and we're kind of reviewing it. We just reviewed it at our committee meeting and we're making a lot of headway, but I think we're to the point where we're ready to have a solid plan annually, a multi-year plan adopted annually was the goal, like have it in policy, like this is the way we do business here in this district. So that you're always looking 3 to 5 years out. I think 5 is a good way to look out. 3 is probably more realistic as to what's going to take place. And then that would then drive each school to make sure that they have a year-long action plan that is directly aligned to that plan. Of course, everything is aligned to the strategic design, which should be updated and so forth as we go along. But that every September that's approved. And it can be approved before then, but no later than September to make sure that's happening. And that way, the district is always thinking ahead, is always working together, whether it be doing it internally or to get people's input from the community and so forth. You're always planning and then looking at data and then planning as a result and making adjustments as you need to, but it's articulated and people know what's going on, people know what's expected. And it really shapes the agenda to all our committee meetings.
So I'm wondering if, we talk about a multi-year plan here, strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering if we should put in there a minimum of 3 years in parentheses or something like that, because I don't think you would ever want to have less than 3 years.
Two would be weird.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if we need to get that specific, but I'm just.
We could even say 3 to 5. We could
3
say
to 5.
5. You could say 5 if you wanted to. I mean,
Well, right, but what you just said though is
Yeah.
true. I mean, I think if you can have a 3-year plan with 2 more years intention, that's great. But I think 3s, you're going to have more. That's where most of your flesh is going to be. And so that's why I'm saying maybe we should just state in there minimum of 3. And if you try and do more than 5, I mean, you're talking real broad strokes out beyond.
Things
5.
are changing so fast right now.
I mean, even 5 years sometimes is.
It's changed in 3 years.
Yeah.
They're not even close to the same.
Yeah. Just leave it multi. Is that it?
I'm okay with 3 years. I think that's a good balance. Because on one hand, you don't know enough about the future to be specific enough.
This is an
to have anything that's
example.
implementable. And on the other side of it, there's no sense of urgency in academia, and it rolls along at a snail's pace anyway. So I think that 3 years is a reasonable compromise.
So what I'm hearing from several of you is that you want to take the board will annually review and adopt an updated, rather than multi-year, you would like it to specifically state 3 to 5 year strategic plan.
Or even just in parentheses after the multi-year.
In parentheses, okay.
Minimum of 3.
Minimum of 3.
1.5.
Okay. All right. There's no other on the first reading. Okay. All right. Can we move on then to board committee updates? The education committee. David left, but I'm pretty sure it's the 17th is when we're going to have our next presentation on professional learning communities. And it's going to be representative, not just of like one particular school or schools. It's going to be across the district. We talked about that at the last meeting. So that's it for education. Finance.
I encourage you to either tune in or attend that one, because even though it's one topic, it's going to be extensive and you'll gain a lot of insight as to the motor of how change and innovation will take place down the road.
Right, and they're being recorded, right, and posted.
Yes, so far. The past two should officially be up
Eventually.
at this point.
So, but I do want to remind people that, you know, it's a public meeting, and if anyone who's not on the education committee chose to come, they would be coming as a community member, not as a board member, because it's a committee meeting and we can't have more than the committee members present acting as. That's all.
And what time is it?
We've been meeting at 4.
Yeah, I think it's at 4 o'clock.
Right. Okay, so then finance. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say there, Charlie. We've been working hard.
Now, I'm trying to look it up here.
Okay. Well, he's looking that up. Facilities, John's not here. I don't know if there was a meeting recently of facilities. There was not? No, okay. Policy we just did. The goals committee we met. We had an overview of the strategic design, the strategic plan, and the goals and where we are with that, kind of like where we move forward, where we haven't made as much progress, but it's all quite exciting. The goals committee is just meeting quarterly to have these quarterly updates about where things are, how they're going.
So for the finance committee, we met and we talked primarily about default budget and the impact of budget reductions on the default budget. And we talked about doing a lot of things, but the end result was we didn't make any changes, because the changes, had we made those changes, they would have impacted the default.
Yep.
As I recall.
Yep. Yes. Thanks. Wellness.
We met today. We realized that one of the goals of the Wellness Committee is to evaluate our food service program. And so we focused our meeting today on primarily on how we should evaluate, what data we should use, how to collect that data, what should be our metrics, and how often we need to evaluate. So we started the process. We'll continue with it.
All right.
And I think it was in the goals committee and in review of our work that we've been doing
Yes.
and the strategic design.
Yeah.
That we lack any robust goals
Yeah.
from a district strategic planning standpoint for wellness. And it's not really reflected enormously in our strategic design either. So, you know, it's going to be about, we're coming in on the 5-year mark of that strategic design. Might we need to have some refreshing
Yeah.
of that?
I mean, the strategic design built on what, 5 goals, I believe it is?
Well, we've turned it into 5 goals. We took 9 vision
Right.
areas and condensed it.
Right, so there's 5 big headlines, and as we went through it and talked about where the lack of wellness presence, like it's kind of insinuated, it's kind of like there, but it should be more explicit. It increases the likelihood of it happening. So one of the things we thought would be really helpful is if the wellness group would look at those and see, like kind of what you think or where you think it should be more explicitly stated. Yeah. Thanks for update on the wellness and for taking notes from the goals. Communication.
Still no update,
Okay.
hoping to perhaps schedule a meeting once budget/voting
Budget?
election season settles down. That's taking up a bit of time right now.
Sounds good. Okay. Any questions, comments for anyone on the committees? All right. We're back to public comments, part 2.
All right, so again, policies up on the screen for everybody. Nope, no, it's not. Now it is. Policies up on the screen for everybody. If you're in person, obviously you can raise your hand physically and we can address you. Remotely, just use the hand raise feature on your screen. It should be at the bottom center. First, last name, town of residence, and we can address you. Anything from our in-person audience? All right, and it appears that we don't have anything at this time from the remote audience either.
All right, thank you. Anything for board matters? No, okay. Future items. This is just that reminder that we have a deliberative session coming.
It's on
February 9th.
Wednesday.
February 9th. And we
Wednesday.
do not have a meeting now on the 7th because we're here tonight. So, all righty.
February 9th at the Rins Memorial School Gymnasium
Yes.
in the evening.
What time is that at, Ruben?
Is it 6:30?
Yes, 6:30 RMS
6:30, I
gym.
believe.
Will be both physical, will be primarily physical. If you want to make a comment, things like that, you need to actually physically be there. Should you want to just observe casually to know what's going on, you have the ability to join in via Zoom. So again, that's the one distinction between a typical school board meeting and the deliberative session. It's the deliberative session, you have to be verified as a voter. You can't do that through the digital process efficiently or realistically. So it's more of an observation tool.
So in person, if you want to have a vote
We're saying.
or a say. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then I adjourn this meeting. Oh, well, should I just technically take a motion, I guess?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Anyone want to second that? Don't technically need it, but thank you, Charlie. Okay, it's adjourned.